So imagine pointing your finger at a map to a place that holds 5 of the world's 14 tallest mountains.
Right, the 8,000ers.
Exactly. And it has a border crossing sitting nearly 16,000 feet up in the sky. You would think the sheer imposing geography of a place like that would be the absolute most intimidating part.
I mean, you'd certainly assume so.
Yeah, but for the people of Gilgit Baltistan in northern Pakistan, the real barrier isn't the rock and the ice. It's actually a 70-year geopolitical black hole.
And what's fascinating here is that it's a place where the physical reality and the legal reality are just in this constant, intense friction.
Yeah.
And for this deep dive, we're looking at a stack of sources that approach this exact region from entirely different angles. We've got a detailed World Bank economic report, a highly technical constitutional law journal, an academic linguistics study, and finally, the boots-on-the-ground diary of a budget backpacker.
Which is such a wild mix of documents. But okay, let's unpack this, because when you layer these sources over each other, they don't just give you some dry summary of a remote province.
No, not at all.
They reveal this incredibly unified story about a population fighting for their fundamental identity against their geography, regional geopolitics, and, the massive invisible pressures of globalization.
It really is a fight on all fronts. But to understand how all of this collides, we first have to look at the physical terrain, because you just cannot separate the daily lives of the people here from the mountains that surround them.
Right. The geography is the foundation of everything else. And the travel guide source illustrates this perfectly. It describes the Karakoram Highway, which people usually abbreviate as the KKH, and it cuts right through the region, basically connecting China to Pakistan.
And travelers routinely call it the eighth wonder of the world.
Oh, absolutely. And when you look at the sheer engineering required to carve a highway into these vertical cliffs, I mean, the title feels completely earned.
Yeah, it's an architectural marvel. And the backpacker's diary we looked at paints this incredibly vivid, almost dizzying picture of the journey.
Yeah, they describe crossing the Kundrab Pass from China, and the wild part to me is just how accessible this adventure is for a tourist.
Right, budget-wise.
Exactly. We're talking $10 to $13 a night for clean, comfortable hotels. They estimate a total budget of around $40 a day for 2 people. You can stay at the Pasu Peak Inn and literally stare out at these massive, jagged granite spires right from your bedroom window.
That sounds incredible, honestly.
Oh.
But then there are the physical anomalies that look beautiful but are actually born out of sheer natural violence.
Oh, right, like Adabad Lake.
Yes. The travel guide spends time on Adabad Lake. It has this pristine, mesmerizing turquoise water. But it only exists because a catastrophic landslide in 2010 literally sheared off the side of a mountain.
Wait, a whole mountainside?
Yeah, just collapsed. It completely blocked the Hunza River and drowned several villages just to form that lake.
That is terrifying. The diary also talks about navigating the Husseini Bridge, which locals and tourists alike call the world's scariest bridge.
I saw pictures of that. It's a suspension bridge strung across this raging river, right?
Yeah, but instead of a solid walkway, it's just splintered wooden planks.
Oh, wow.
And there are massive, terrifying gaps between the planks, all of it just hanging from rusting steel cables. Just reading the description makes your palms sweat. It feels like an adventurer's absolute playground.
It does. But we have to remember that the same jagged peaks that protect them from mass tourism also act as a physical cage.
A cage, right.
Yeah. The World Bank report dives into what it calls the economic geography of Gilgit Baltistan. And the reality of living there year-round is defined by extreme isolation. The Karakoram Highway isn't some reliable year-round avenue.
It gets blocked, right.
Yeah, it gets completely blocked by heavy snowfall for months at a time.
And you can't just bypass the icy roads by flying in either, because the report notes that 40% of flights from Islamabad to Gilgit are canceled.
That's a massive failure rate for commercial flights.
It is. And the reason why is fascinating. The planes literally need a clear visual line of sight to navigate through the mountain passes. So if a heavy cloud rolls in, the flight is just grounded.
Wow. Which, of course, heavily dictates human settlement.
Yeah.
You have this massive land area, but an incredibly sparse population density. We are looking at just 12 people per square kilometer in Gilgit Baltistan.
12 people? That's nothing.
Right. To give you some contrast, down in the Punjab province, it's 359 people per square kilometer.
That really puts it in perspective. It makes me think of the Karakoram Highway not just as a piece of infrastructure, but as a literal umbilical cord for the locals.
That's a good way to put it.
It is their single tenuous lifeline to the outside world. But I do have to push back on the economic framing here a bit.
Oh, how so?
Well, if we have this gorgeous tourist destination with dirt cheap accommodations and world-class mountain views, why isn't it an economic powerhouse? Like, why isn't the local population getting incredibly wealthy off international tourism like the Swiss Alps?
Well, the geography creates an incredibly high barrier to entry for any large-scale commercial development. You can't easily build massive resorts when you can't reliably fly in cement or food.
Okay, that makes sense.
But what's remarkable in the World Bank data is that despite these towering physical odds, the people of Gilgit Baltistan are actually undergoing a rapid, self-driven economic transformation. They're basically pulling themselves up by their own bootstraps.
Really? How so?
Well, between 2001 and 2005, their per capita income growth was 6.5%. And that noticeably outpaced the national average, which was only 5.3%.
Wait, how are they achieving that kind of growth while trapped behind snowed-in mountain passes?
By fundamentally changing their agricultural mechanism. Historically, this region relied on basic subsistence farming.
Like just growing enough to survive.
Exactly. Trying to grow enough wheat or maize on rocky, terraced plots just to make it through the winter. But they recognized that grain is incredibly hard to scale in that environment. So they transitioned to high-value, low-volume cash crops.
And the sources highlight a company called Mountain Fruits Private Limited as a prime example of this, right?
Exactly. Instead of fighting the terrain, they utilized the specific microclimates of these valleys to grow premium orchards. We're talking apricots, cherries, and apples.
Which are much easier to transport for their value.
Right. And Mountain Fruits Private Limited didn't just grow the fruit. They introduced mechanisms to harvest, dry, and package these fruits to strict international standards.
Oh, wow. So suddenly a local farmer isn't just trying to feed their immediate family.
Yeah, they are connected to global organic food supply chains.
That is brilliant. And, the ripple effects of that economic shift show up in the human development data, and it is genuinely surprising.
The social indicators are fantastic.
They really are. You would assume an isolated mountain region would severely lag behind the rest of the country in social metrics, but they are completely outperforming the national averages. The World Bank report shows that 62% of households in Gilgit Baltistan have piped water.
Which is huge.
Yeah, compared to just 29% in Punjab. They also boast the lowest incidence of childhood diarrhea in the entire country, at just 5%.
And the educational metrics show a similar generational leap, too.
Yeah.
Adult literacy skyrocketed from a mere 15% in 1981 to 51% in 2005.
That is wild. And when you think about the mechanism behind getting piped water to 62% of homes in a mountainous, isolated region, it points to intense community mobilization.
Because the government isn't doing it for them.
Exactly. If the central infrastructure isn't reaching them, these villages are likely banding together, pooling their resources, and building their own gravity-fed plumbing systems straight from the glacial streams down into their settlements.
They're essentially building a modern functioning society out of sheer rock. But if we connect this to the bigger picture, this incredible economic and social momentum is hitting a hard, artificial ceiling.
A ceiling created by bureaucracy.
Yeah. Let's look at the movement of routine development funding from the Federal Center in Islamabad. For the neighboring region of Azad, Jammu, and Kashmir, transferring standard development funds takes about 10 days.
Okay, 10 days. Standard.
Right. But for Gilgit Baltistan, that exact same routine transfer can take up to 40 days.
A 40-day delay for your own funding.
Yeah.
If you are trying to build seasonal infrastructure like repairing a road or a water line before the winter snow sets in, a 40-day delay from the capital means your construction window might completely close.
Exactly. And that delay isn't just a matter of slow paperwork. It is the symptom of a massive legal and constitutional bottleneck.
Which means we need to look at the legal framework. So, to you listening, I want you to imagine this. Imagine you are doing everything right. You are transitioning your business to global markets, you're educating your kids, you are mobilizing your community to pipe in clean water.
Doing all the hard work.
Yeah. But your legal status in your own country is essentially a giant question mark. How do you govern that?
You really can't. And the Constitutional Law Journal we reviewed dives straight into this tension. The people of Gilgit Baltistan are driving a 21st century economy, yet legally they exist in a state of constitutional limbo. They're basically stateless within their own country.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The history of how they arrived in this legal black hole is fascinating. On November 1st, 1947, the people of Gilgit Baltistan staged a revolt against the ruling Dogra regime.
Right, and to give some context, the Doggers were essentially a princely monarchy that had been installed and backed by the British Empire.
Exactly. So the locals fought a war of liberation against them, they won, and for 16 days, Gilgit Baltistan was an entirely independent sovereign republic.
16 days.
Just 16 days. And after that, they voluntarily and unconditionally chose to accede to the newly formed state of Pakistan.
And yet, more than 7 decades later, they are still not a full constitutional province of Pakistan.
Which sounds crazy.
It does. But the legal reasoning for this, as detailed in the journal, is deeply tethered to the broader, ongoing Kashmir conflict.
And before we get into the weeds of this, I want to pause and talk directly to you, the listener, because we are wading into the Kashmir conflict territory here.
Right, which is incredibly politically charged.
Exactly. So we need to make it absolutely clear that we are not taking a political stance on this. We aren't endorsing right-wing or left-wing views from India or Pakistan. We are strictly reporting the constitutional mechanics and the survey data that are sitting right here in our sources.
Absolutely. We are just looking at the legal framework on paper, impartially.
Yes. So, looking at this strictly through the lens of constitutional mechanics, stepping completely outside the heated politics, the Law Journal points out how Pakistan's constitution handles this territory technically.
Under Article 257 of Pakistan's constitution, the official status of Gilgit Baltistan is tied to the unresolved United Nations resolutions regarding the Kashmir dispute.
Okay, so they are legally linked.
Right. The technical legal argument is that if Pakistan were to officially absorb Gilgit-Baltistan as a full, permanent constitutional province, it could be interpreted by the international community as unilaterally altering the status quo of the disputed territory.
Ah, I see. So their entire political identity is frozen in time, basically waiting for an international resolution that hasn't moved in decades.
Exactly. And the current patch for this is the 2018 Governance Order, which functions as the supreme law of the land in Gilgit-Baltistan, superseding standard provincial law.
And how does that order actually work on the ground?
Well, the practical mechanism of that 2018 order is massive centralization. It pulls executive power heavily into the hands of the Prime Minister of Pakistan, essentially bypassing local authority.
Leaving the locals with what?
Very little. The local Gilgit-Baltistan Legislative Assembly has extremely limited powers. They cannot just draft and pass legislation to solve their own community problems the way a standard provincial assembly could.
And the Law Journal highlights a staggering double standard in the judiciary that really brings this home.
The judge appointments?
Yeah. The governance order allows a Chief Justice for the Gilgit-Baltistan Supreme Appellate Court to be appointed and brought in from other provinces of Pakistan. But a citizen of Gilgit-Baltistan cannot serve as a judge in those other provinces.
That's a one-way street.
Totally. Imagine going to law school, passing the bar, rising to the absolute top of the legal profession in your hometown, but being told your career has an invisible asterisk on it the moment you cross the provincial line, simply because of where you were born.
It is systemic marginalization, and the academic survey data we looked at shows that the population's patience has completely run out.
What do the numbers say?
Well, 76% of the residents surveyed are dissatisfied with the current status quo.
That's a huge majority.
Right. 41.9% want to be integrated as a full constitutional province immediately, and 69.3% are demanding voting members in Pakistan's national parliament.
They want a voice in the room.
Exactly. They want a voice in the room where the decisions affecting their 40-day funding delays and infrastructure are actually being made.
And the most telling statistic from the survey directly addresses that international legal argument we talked about. 67.2% of the people say they are not willing to wait for the Kashmir issue to be resolved to get their fundamental rights.
They are demanding that their legal reality match their economic reality. They're modernizing and they want the law to catch up.
Mm-hmm.
But there is a hidden cost to this desperation.
Yeah, there is. So you have this population that is desperate to integrate into the broader Pakistani economy to escape this limbo. They want those stable government jobs in Islamabad.
Who wouldn't?
Right. But that desperation is causing an invisible, tragic casualty, which brings us to the academic linguistic study. To survive and get ahead in this bottleneck system, the people of Gilgit-Baltistan are actively abandoning their own ancient culture.
It's really sad.
No.
The region is historically home to a vibrant tapestry of indigenous languages. The study identifies 6 main ones: Shina, Waki, Balti, Kawar, Damaki, and Brushaski.
And Buruchowski is really unique, isn't it?
It is. It's particularly notable for linguists because it is a language isolate.
Mean what, exactly?
That means it has absolutely no known linguistic relatives anywhere on planet Earth. It doesn't connect to the Indo-European languages. It doesn't connect to the Sino-Tibetan languages. It is an utter linguistic island.
Oh, wow. And then you have languages like Domaki, which the researchers found is teetering on the absolute edge of extinction. We're talking only about 350 native speakers left.
And what the researchers find so alarming is the mechanism of this decline. These languages are not dying a natural, slow death. They're essentially being murdered by their own native speakers.
So what does this all mean? The linguistic study points out a growing sense of worthlessness regarding these mother tongues. It's like cultural gentrification. You clean up your resume and you clean up your language for the global market, but in the process, you evict your original identity.
Yeah, the academic paper uses the word apathy to describe why parents aren't passing these languages down.
But I have to strongly push back on that framing.
Really? Why?
Because apathy implies laziness or a lack of caring. But if I live in Gilgit Baltistan, and the only way to secure a stable income for my family is to pass a civil service exam and get a government job in the capital, I absolutely have to master English and Urdu.
That's true.
Can we really blame a mother for speaking English to her child if she believes that is the only key to unlocking their future? That isn't apathy. That is pure survival.
No, you're right. It is entirely rational economic behavior. It is capitalism overpowering culture. The economic incentives heavily favor the dominant national and global languages. And the study meticulously tracks how this shift happens in everyday domestic life.
Like with marriage.
Exactly. Exogamous marriages, where individuals marry outside their specific indigenous linguistic group, are becoming much more common as populations mix. And when that happens, Urdu naturally becomes the default, neutral language spoken in the home.
So the indigenous languages simply don't get passed to the children.
Right.
And the physical transition of the youth also plays a massive role here. You have kids leaving their tight-knit farming villages to live in urban dormitories for their education. They lose daily contact with the elders who speak the language natively.
The researchers even tracked the erosion of intimate vocabulary. Traditional pet names, like the word guru, are being replaced by English words like sweetie.
Wow.
Kinship terms are vanishing entirely. Children are calling their relatives uncle or daddy instead of using the highly specific traditional family titles.
That is such a profound, intimate loss. The very specific words you use to address the people you love most in the world are being overwritten by generic English equivalents. And as the economy transitions away from agriculture, which we saw earlier with Mountain Fruits Private Limited, entire massive vocabularies just vanish.
Because think about what happens to a language when the daily reality shifts. For centuries, the vocabulary of these indigenous languages was built around the rhythms of an agrarian life.
Right, farming terms.
Exactly. They had highly specialized terms for terraced farming, different types of snowpack, and very specific harvesting techniques.
But if you're not farming...
Right. When a generation stops farming and moves to a city dormitory to study for a desk job, that entire vocabulary loses its context. There is no reason to use a word for a specific farming tool in an urban office building. So those words simply evaporate from the human record.
And the sources highlight a deeply tragic irony in all of this. The study quotes a local intellectual who tried to preserve traditional Balti folktales by sharing them online.
And how did people react?
Well, instead of being celebrated for saving their heritage, he was actively mocked on social media by his own people. Someone commented, "Yilog is kumka abkia banega," which roughly translates to, "Look, what will become of this nation?"
Ouch.
Yeah. The implication is that clinging to these old stories and old words is literally holding them back from modernity.
It is the ultimate paradox of their development. The very modernization that is finally bringing piped water to their homes, jumping their literacy rates by 40% and boosting their household income, is simultaneously silencing their ancestral voices.
It is a remarkably heavy price to pay for a seat at the table. So let's look back at the terrain we've covered today.
We've covered a lot.
We really have. We started at the dizzying, terrifying heights of the Karakoram Highway and the splintered planks of the Husseini Bridge. We navigated through a genuinely impressive self-made economic boom that is currently suffocating inside a 40-day bureaucratic bottleneck. We waded through 7 decades of complex constitutional limbo, dating all the way back to a 16-day independent republic. And finally, we listened to the quiet, voluntary fading of ancient, isolated languages as the people try to buy their way into the modern world.
It is a landscape of profound extremes, both physical and societal.
So why should you, the listener, care about this remote mountain region on the edge of the Himalayas?
Because it's not just an isolated anomaly.
Exactly, because Gilgit Baltistan isn't just an obscure geographic trivia question. It is a highly concentrated microcosm of the ultimate modern tension. It is the intense, grinding friction between the desire for global economic integration and the desperate, fading need for local identity.
We all face versions of this balancing act in our own lives. But in Gilgit Baltistan, the stakes are entirely existential.
And that tension leaves us with a critical question to ponder.
Yeah, I want to leave you all with a final thought today. If a language like Burushaski, a linguistic island with absolutely no connection to any other human tongue on Earth, vanishes simply because someone needed to learn English to get a government desk job.
What else are we losing?
Exactly. What other utterly unique reservoirs of human knowledge are we globally trading away right now for the sake of economic convenience? And are we even realizing the transaction has taken place before the knowledge is gone forever?
The lines on a map might seem permanent, but the people living inside those blurry borders are paying a very real, very human price to finally be seen. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll catch you next time.